I think, yeah, and I would hate to see, it already has happened to some extent, but I would hate to see um, AI Twitter go even further in the direction of NFT Twitter. You know,
Yeah,
like
it has that risk for sure. Well,
like it's
I mean,
already it's already there. I mean, it's the closest thing to NFT Twitter I've ever seen that isn't NFT Twitter already.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we've talked about it offline, but like this idea that yeah, it's like there's a lot of desire both at the investor level and the entrepreneurship level for AI to be this iPhone moment where a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of people are going to succeed. And so a lot of people are grifting or a lot of people are more just trying to generate a big following and hoping that their startup succeeds. But as we've seen with every model release, taking out a ton of startups, a lot of these companies are just wrappers where they're giving specific instructions to the foundation models. And I'm sure there's business value there, but it's also a very indefensible moat, right? If the model's sufficiently better on the next release, your little wrapper now looks like a joke. Pardon my puppy in the background.
Yeah, and whatever, honestly, more than the wrapper, like the moat that you could have would be honestly the making sure the thing works, like, and having the
Yeah,
data to validate it and the data to compare the
right,
process to make sure that it'll actually work in the real world, and can be reliable, right?
right.
Like that would probably be the moat to build, and I don't see a lot of them building that moat, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah,
we're actually
yeah,
never going to ship this thing. We're going
right.
to talk about it. We're going to call it the first AI, and then we're going to get a bunch of investment, and then
Yeah,
we're going to, either partner with somebody or exit, never actually ship anything. Because
right,
the reality is that most of these companies, at least like Devin for me is the canonical example of like, let's take something that's really big in the open source community, right? Like
right,
agents doing X, and that they're pretty good at in the open source community. And then let's spend a couple weekends and make a pretty UI around it, and make a nice pitch deck, and then claim we have the first AI something, right?
yeah,
No
yeah, yeah,
science, a mid benchmark, right? And probably most of what the work that was done actually to take whatever the open source thing was and make it into a product was to tweak it so that the prompts pushed it to perform well on the benchmark, right?
yeah,
Potentially
yeah, yeah,
even
yeah, right,
putting questions from the benchmark into the prompt. I don't think they do
right,
this, but it's possible, right? And
right,
so, like, this kind of, we've made the first, if anybody tells you they've made the first AI enter a profession here, they're probably wrong. Because the
right,
question you should be
right.
asking is, why didn't ChatGPT do this? Why
Yeah,
didn't insert big company that has thousands of AI talent and a lot of eyes on how this technology works, where it's good, where there's money to be made? Why didn't they
right.
try it? Right?
And do they have access to some exclusive data set, right? Like you would need to have some proprietary data set that hasn't been scraped already, doesn't exist to consistently perform better. So I think that makes a perfect hype tornado. You have investors and entrepreneurs trying to sell the dream when really they don't have any foundational hard tech moat, right? It's just we have some tuning, we have some direction we're putting on top of the foundation model, but we are not fundamentally making breakthroughs. Like you said, they're taking things from open source, which can work. I mean, you see that in the infrastructure space for servers and everything. People will take open source solutions and bundle them up, but how many winners can there be doing that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like it's an interesting thought, and then like also how many of these moats could you do as like a separate business, right? Like, could you be providing the validation or providing the fine tuning? I think these are all pretty dried up at this point, right? Like people were quick to jump on those opportunities, where you say, oh, I know that these companies aren't doing a good job of making their moat, so I'll make the moat. I'll make that non-existent moat my moat by offering it to companies, right? Like that's a possibility. But yeah, it is always interesting to see where like what the direction of this trend is, and then like where we only have a certain experience with startups and with tech companies and how they grow and how they
Right.
form and how they compete, and we're kind of in uncharted waters now. Like we can apply
Yeah.
some of that,
Right. Right.
some of that crosses over,
Yep.
but AI is going to change a lot of it, and so I can't predict what's going to happen. And
No.
and honestly, like the people who do predict it, right, they'll be the winners. They'll be the big winners. So
Right. 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 No, it's a fascinating space, and like I think it looks a lot more like the sort of AWS, Azure, Google Cloud kind of fight than it does the iPhone, where the iPhone
hmm
had this new platform, all these possibilities. But it feels like the end state of this is her. Everybody seems to agree. Jarvis, her, insert your AI assistant, frame of
Star
reference here.
Trek computer.
Yeah, perfect. HAL, whatever it may be. That points to sort of one winner, right? That doesn't point to a lot of winners. It doesn't seem like you're having a stable of associates. You want your one companion, maybe a few, maybe, but like you have this, whoever gets that right, that will be the way you want to interface with computing. If you had Jarvis, why would you go through anybody else? You want Jarvis to pull the information and bring it to you. You want to work with Jarvis. You want him to put up a tool for you to use for anything it can't do. I think the entrepreneur scene is hoping that you're actually going to get a plurality and there's a bunch of different tools. And I don't know if that's a safe bet right now. That feels wishful thinking more than business reality right now.
Well, I think I agree. I think, if I was a smart person who was trying to make a bet on AI not being the future. Like I think I hear this argument of like, is
Yeah.
AI the future? Is AI not the future? And sometimes it feels like people are saying that if AI is not the future, it's going to go away and everything's going to go back to the way it was before this. And it's not going to happen. And maybe
Right.
they mean it's like all progress is going to stop. So AI will be where it is in my life today. But if we stop growing exponentially, then it's just going to stop and it'll remain in those places in my life. This is also
Right.
false, right? Like,
Right.
there's a lot of value to AI that either one hasn't been discovered by people.
Right.
Like, I constantly am doing things in ChatGPT and people see it and they're blown away. I didn't know ChatGPT could do that, right? Like,
Right.
and then on top of it, there's so much. We've talked about this in past episodes. There's so much for developers and designers and people who
Yeah.
build these systems to unlock still. If models stopped making any progress and we were stuck with GPT 4.0 for the rest of eternity, there is so much more we could do with it that we just haven't figured out yet, and or haven't had the time, or it hasn't made it high enough up on the priority list, right? And so, as if we're having a conversation about like, yeah, well, what's the future of AI? I think if you're smart and you think we're not going to see exponential growth, we're actually further along on the S curve than people think. If you're smart, you're going to acknowledge that, okay, but there's still AI stuff to happen and there's still AI
Right.
opportunity.
Right. Right.
And then
Yeah.
maybe in that world, it looks a little bit more like what you said, Chris, where it's like, oh, we have a video editor AI and we have three of them and
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
pick which one you want. And right, it looks more like the internet revolution or the app revolution, right, with the phones. And, so that if you believe that AI is not going to make as much progress as the smart people working on AI believe, then maybe a hedge is to found one of these sort of smaller companies that would be more successful in the non-AI explosion world, but still could also, if you're successful in the next year or something, could also be quite valuable as a company to own. Like, I think sometimes when I'm evaluating how well a startup will do, I'm like, will you beat us at Microsoft, or will you beat Google, or will you beat one of these big players? And because that's the world that we're used to thinking in. But really, is it like, if we're talking about, personal success for these founders, is it like, can you build enough trust with your users that somehow in the AGI world they haven't, you build some integration or some product that might not even resemble or even be in the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
world as
Yeah.
your original product, but you've got that brand and that's really valuable, or if you've got that
But
trust, it's really valuable.
yeah, I mean, I buy that for things that are more outside of the orbit of the traditional tech industry, right? Like, the problem is you see so many of these AI startups going after things that obviously big companies will go after. We're going to make
Mm-hmm.
it like Devin, right? AI developer. If you don't think every big company is going to look at that situation and be like, we would like to participate in that, that's crazy. Of course they are, right? Like, we were
And
early with
GitHub
GitHub
Copilot,
Copilot,
right?
but like, you're going to see others do this. It would be insane to think Google's not doing this. It would be insane to think folks don't have a vested interest in making tech jobs more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But where is the company that's trying to do like medication compliance or like mental health for the elderly? Like, those are spaces where, okay, the big companies probably aren't going to invest a lot of money in that space because they won't be able to scale those to a level that justifies the internal cost. But those aren't sexy, right? What's sexy is AI dev, AI designer, all these spaces that are obvious targets for large organizations.
Right. An AI engineering licensing board is not as sexy, but it might actually be what the future is, right? Like, I
Yep,
need
yep, yep.
somebody to be able to confirm that somebody's foundation model or someone's AI product built on a foundation model is going to be able to, it's providing me legal advice, or if it's doing engineering for me. It's like, there's a reason we have these certification boards and these processes for people, like professional certifications and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I do think there's something
I mean,
interesting there.
it's worth making the case. Folks like Sam Altman disagree with this take, right? They seem to be envisioning a future where there are a lot of. He had that quote of like, "It's the best time to be making startups ever." And so maybe that is real. Maybe if you have your GPT-6 or something, and it's beyond PhD level at skills, there's still a lot of work to adapt that to various domains. On the interface side, maybe people do want specific interfaces for these scenarios that haven't been thought of and won't be invested in by folks like OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever. Could be. But I don't think making yet another wrapper startup for tech employees is going to get you there.
Right. And we see how many of them get funded. Like, there are how many of them in
Oh
the
my God,
latest Y Combinator class?
Just nuts.
And the rest of the class is like people trying to challenge like Azure or like BigQuery, and it's like, what are you
Or
doing?
it's like, how many social media AI startups are there right now? Hundreds? Like, it's just this insane amount of people trying to figure out how to make Buffer 2.0 with AI. And you're like, I guess someone wins there, but it's always surprising to me that there's yet another competitor in that space. Whereas I think some of the novel ones that are these, like to your point, these weirder niche opportunities that help industries that are traditionally very afraid of adopting tech. Because then you'd have a moat. The moat is maybe the founders are from that industry, maybe they understand the regulatory environment really well. Like if you're trying to get into medicine, having a background in the medical codes and the legal codes around that, it's going to be a huge moat that a lot of the companies won't bother jumping in on. But yeah, yet another software engineer in a box. Maybe not.
I mean, has Devin even shipped? Like, I don't see people posting Devin stuff all the time.
No, I think the winners there are GitHub Copilot and Cursor. People love Cursor.
Well,
But
the
that's
winner's
not
also
automated.
Devin. They got their bag, right? The winner, like, they did win. Like, they got
right. Oh yeah.
Microsoft invested in them, and
we had them at Build, right?
They were at Build. We were not at Build, but they were at Build.
We were not Build. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's something to be said. I even saw it today. I honestly forget the industry, but I saw another. We're the first AI something. I was like, and it was the same pitch. It was, we got the best score ever on this benchmark.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was like, okay, like, are you gonna release any of the code? Are you gonna tell us what that means?
Can we verify those questions weren't in your training set, right? Like,
right.
You're just spitting out answers to questions you already know the answer to.
Or even, what did you do, right? Like, what was your process? Because it gets to the point where, okay, even if you didn't put the data in the training set, right? Like, what if you spent just months running this on the benchmark test set,
right,
and making tweaks? You don't even necessarily need to know why the tweak made your score on the benchmark better. You just need to know that it made the score better.
Right.
So, like,
right.
It's like a double layer black box where now people are like, it's like, it's the classic problem of, like, you don't use in ML. I don't know if anybody was doing this, if any of our listeners were into this in like the CNN days, like before the Gen AI revolution. I was like I was still in school, but like, yeah, one of the first things they teach you is like, you use separate training and validation data, separate data sets, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You can't use the same. That results in overfitting or bad results, or at the very least, you don't understand the actual performance of the model. And so, like, and when I say training in this case, like in the Devin case, they certainly don't have their own foundation model. So maybe I mean fine tuning, or maybe I mean actually going in and tweaking manually and not training. But regardless, I think the point is still the same. That if you keep making these sorts of fake AI employees, it's like they're going to be the boy who cried Devin, and at some point, like, someone's actually going to make an AI software engineer.
Right.
And it's like probably going to be GitHub, but someone's going to do it, and then they're going to be like, oh my God, we actually did it. And everyone's going to be like, oh, it's just Devin came out and nothing happened. It's like, no, but that's because they lied to you, right? Like, now this is a real company telling you the truth.